I'm really glad to be speaking today. And I've been really interested by a whole series of the presentations I've seen about the use of data and technology around learning. And like any training team, and I look after a training team of about 560 people on the railway that works across the UK. Very much coming from a basis of a few years ago where we were focused on face-to-face training, really to achieve the compliance on fundamental railway skills, both for within Network Rail and the wider rail industry. And what we've seen over recent years is this trend to use more and more technology, just like all of you in the room. But I think one of the most exciting developments for us in the last 12 months or so has been this use of analytics to really start to shape our training in a new direction. What I'm not trying to do is pretend that we're any smarter or any further ahead than anybody else, right? In some areas we might be a little bit better, in many areas we might be a lot worse. What I'm trying to do is get across just how we're trying to apply the very basics to get some tangible understanding of the value that training really adds and how it links directly to the performance of the railway and to the experience that our passengers have on the trains on a day-to-day basis. And it's that link between the training we give and the experience that the passenger has directly using the same language that our managers have within the business that is going to be such a powerful tool, I think. So I think it's much of our approach to the use of analytics stemmed from a business decision taken 3 or 4 years ago where the company decided to move from a heavily centralized business to devolving the day-to-day running of the network out to individual routes. With that devolvement went the training budget. So I used to look after a team that held all the money. People came to me. It was actually quite effortless, if I'm honest. I had to worry just about a budget. And using the sort of central engineering teams and the operations teams, we decided what training was really needed, and the individual routes had to decide whether they could be compliant with that particular requirement. Once we'd transferred the budget out and our customers had to pay for it, they then started asking some really fundamental questions of what value did that training really give them? Did they really need people to be competent in this space? What difference did it actually make? And it culminated in an investment paper I'd brought towards the central investment panel that the company runs, where the safety director asked me a very straight question. I was asking for, I think, £40 million to build a new London-centred training centre. And he asked me a very question. Actually, over the last 10 years, we've done all this training in safety over the company. How could I tell him how much value that had really added, right? Had it been successful? And I really couldn't give him a very smart answer. And that started the ball running. And so we've been working with our tech partner, PA Consulting, over the last 12 months, really to start the journey on the basics of developing a link between training and performance. And what I'm trying to do today is to explain step by step how we've made that link and how we're putting it into practice as we speak today in the company. And then I want to go on to explain what we want to do next. And if this was the space race, I would say that today we have, maybe this will work for some of the older of you, that we've launched Sputnik in terms of the space technology, and we really want to get ourselves to landing on the moon, right? But it's really quite a big challenge to get there. So I'm afraid I have to start with just a little bit of an explanation of how things work in the railway. Now, Network Rail its job is to own and operate Britain's railway infrastructure so that it can provide safe and reliable railway journeys for our passengers. And there's an awful lot of it. And to make it manageable, we've split it up into 14 routes organised in 5 regions. And in each of those routes, they're broken up into delivery units and depots. And it's from those depots that maintenance teams operate. That's really important, because what that does is that places a geographical point for a team. And then we can look at how that part of the railway is performing and how it contributes, and link it directly to the competence of the people involved. And that's the basis of how we've started to look at the way in which training then links to performance. So, what we've developed is this tool called the Dynamic Demand Planning Tool. And it works in 3 steps. The first step is that we've got a straightforward piece of HR data collection that looks at things like competencies held, turnover, releasability, how people fit onto their rosters, looking at the budgets available for training and so on. Looking at all of that stuff that we know and creating a base training plan. That's the bit on the left. And then we overlay business performance layers over the top of this to see what impact that has on the way in which competence relates. Benchmarking individual teams across the company to see where they fit in relation to each other at their competence levels, and linking it back to that performance. So we'll be talking of areas like delay minutes, delay costs, fixed times, work bank delays, how much of a backlog have they got within their maintenance schedules, and linking it all the way back down to the frontline managers. And that then gives us insights about what we could do to change that training plan to add more value and directly enhance the business performance. And finally, and it's just been one of the really important steps, is the third step, where we use it then to create individual training plans for each of the sections out on the ground, so that essentially every quarter we now produce a poster that explains the training to each team on the ground. It goes into their mess room and they can see what they're going to get. And that's turned out to be a really important tool for the engagement that we have with our frontline teams. The key activity in all of this is the conversation between our local training managers and the local frontline managers, this relationship. So what we've created is a BI tool here, a Power BI tool, that links geography to performance to competence, and provides an insight of where we think competence could have the biggest impact on changing that overall performance. Most importantly, what it allows the training manager to do is to sit down with the individual section managers and have that conversation and provide real-time information on where that impact can be felt the most. Most importantly, it provides the costed information, and the deal can be done there and then about the changes to the training plan and understanding the financial implications of what's been asked for. So it works in absolutely real time, and for me, it's been so important that we're able to have that conversation and walk out of the room with an agreed, changed and costed plan. Because there are 300 or so of these key frontline managers working every day on the railway, and we can't afford to do several visits. We've got to really prioritise what we do in that space. But we have to start somewhere. And how was it that we were able to therefore decide amongst all the different regions, all the different routes, all the different depots, where we would go to first to have a look at how we could have the greatest impact as the training organisation on the performance of the business? The tool allows us to dig straight into the data and look to start at the performance data, looking at section by section across the land. It allows us to pick out key areas, and what it shows actually is that the network is a pretty complicated place. That's really no surprise. But certain areas, and if I'm just using delay costs, and as I mentioned, there's loads and loads of different criteria here. But if we're just looking at the cost of delays, and that's the payments that we make to the train operators when a delay occurs, we can see that somewhere like in Northwest and Central, in the area called Piccadilly Central, Manchester Piccadilly, those that know it, they've got a very high level of costs associated with the delays, right? That gives us then the chance to have a really good conversation with the line manager responsible for running that part of the railway and understand which part of those delays can be attributed to competence. Now, sometimes it's got absolutely nothing to do with competence at all. You know, a lot of this coincides with those nodal parts of the network which are hugely congested, right? Or the assets in that part of the network could be very old and tired, and they fail a lot, right? So you have to take that into account. So it doesn't give you an automatic finding, but what it does is signpost you to the point where you have the potential to add the greatest value. So this is what it sort of looks like. And what I'll do is just, as I said, there's about 324 different nodal points. And I'm just looking at the three here that are in the Northwest, just as an illustration. What we do out of that HR tool is that we produce the initial training plan built up from the competence and individual HR data of what's needed. And each of these teams is about 30 or so people strong. And with that plan and talking to people, we come up with a list of training activities on things like electrical signals, points, interlocking relays, axle counters, level crossing barriers, those sort of things that are needed to make sure that team is capable of making the repairs that the business needs. We then sit down with the manager and open the tool. And it's at this point that we start to break down things into individual delay categories. And this is immensely detailed, and I'm not going to go through a vast quantity of all the different areas that we look at. So I'm just pinning this one example. But what it does do, we've got about 1,200 recognizable faults. And we burrow down to each of the really key faults that have the biggest impact on performance and delays, and look to see where we can have the greatest effect. So what this is telling us here is that in this particular case, for that particular area of the railway, what we're seeing is that failures on the points around supplementary detection, which is a particular type of fault, we're seeing about £339,000 worth of delay costs associated with that particular failure over the last 12 to 20 months. What we then do is link that to the relevant competencies that are associated with carrying out that repair activity and do a subsequent link to the training course related to achieving those competencies, and we know what that course costs. We then benchmark that section against the rest of the country's area of competence in it to give us a feel for whether those competences could be an indicator for the cause of those delay costs. And if we see, for example, that actually they're hugely competent in their area and there's a really good breadth of experience in the team around that particular skill set, then it's unlikely that competence is the cause of those delay costs. But if we actually see that they're well adrift from that, it starts to give us a clue about whether we should be adding more training into that particular space. So as a result of that discussion, and very often the section manager will say, actually, it's got nothing to do, my team knows what they're doing, but actually the points here are just completely shot, and they're due for replacement in 20 months' time. Right? But what we are finding, actually, is that in probably 2 out of 3 cases, competence is one of the factors associated with that resulting performance. We then take that factor, and we can do a number of things. We can either add training. Sometimes it's telling us that actually that the training they've asked for is just not necessary, and we can produce a savings on their budget, and they appreciate that. Right? Sometimes it's telling us something quite different, that we look at it and we realize that they are theoretically competent, but they're just not using that competence very effectively on the ground. And so what we have done as a result over the last 12 months is started to introduce team training where we take the team as a group, and whilst they're all individually competent, we bring them up and we drill them to be even more effective in that area, because we know how important it is in achieving the objectives on their particular patch of the railway. It's also led, starting from around about last November, where we've been sending our trainers out onto the track over night time to individually coach the teams in the activity, to really top up those skill factors. So it's really having a very changing effect, not just on the volume of training that we're delivering, where actually we're taking away as much as we add and produce a savings, but it's adding a new range of training services that they are pulling on because they can see the benefits to pay for one of my trainers to go out and coach the business effectively. So if I look at just those particular sections on the impact, when we started to add and subtract different opportunities on their training plans, they broadly worked out sort of neutral, right? We took away as much as we added. But what we were able to point to and analyse was that actually we could impact nearly £1 million worth of performance costs in the business, right? And so I was able to sit down with the individual directors in that area and start to say, actually, the money that you're now spending in this space, I can now start to signpost exactly the changes that we will be able to see in your business as a result of the training that we're giving. But it doesn't stop there, because actually we're at the first iteration of that cycle. We've now trained up all our local training managers to be able to carry out those conversations and use all the analytical tools. That's taken a journey for them. A lot of them aren't used to using complex spreadsheets and other data tools. I use a phrase that everybody in the business now has simply got to get data smart, right? It's no longer acceptable to sit there and put your hand up every time someone introduces a new bit of clever tech for you. It's a tool now. If you're a soldier, this stuff is your rifle, right? And everyone's got to be able to use it. So, but it's incredibly powerful to our front line, because they can now genuinely see why they're bothering to have a conversation with you. They can now see that you can offer them a way out of improving their budget line. But it's still at that good educated guess stage. So we think, if I take those last 3 examples, that's 3 out of 300, it's about £1 million worth of impact. But having forecast that, we now need to track it. So we're recording those decisions, looking at what those changes mean, and then tracking those performance measures that we believe will change as a result of it, and producing this virtuous cycle. And our understanding will grow and grow as we turn that cycle over, really beginning to understand more and more about the impact that our training has on performance. So as a starter, and we started this at the area around technicians and around the maintenance of the network. But there's a lot more to the network that needs challenging. We need to expand it outwards to cover all the other aspects of the railway, our signalling staff, our station staff. We need to expand it into our supply chain. 2/3 of the workforce sit within our supply chain, right? They're just as important to understand the impact of their skills and their contribution. After all, we design those skills. What we're finding is some surprising areas have emerged for us. One of the areas that is quite a big cost driver is the way in which the business uses labour-only subcontractors. Excuse me. And those labour-only subcontractors are often brought in because they bring in a particular skill set. A minor tweak to the training plan could mean that we can remove a whole swathe of them. So there's a whole series of things that we can do to continuously improve. But, excuse me, there's a bigger prize for me, is that we've started this initial link around the technical, the hard data links between around technical skills and performance. But behaviour is as big a challenge to address, very much more complex. And this is where we've brought in Capita to help us. And if you like, our approach with technology was to build it through spreadsheets, move to Power BI, and just build it up one step at a time. Here, what we've seen is that there is just so many millions of different potential outcomes here that actually we're going directly to machine learning here to build it right into the start of the process. We're really early days here, and I can't, I don't even know how easy it's going to be to unlock this particular challenge. But I do know that when we look at our incidences and challenges across the industry, helping improve behaviour and culture is as big a challenge for us as enhancing the technical know-how of the teams. So it's at least the biggest prize to go for. But does it work? Right? And of course, that's always a million-dollar question. We've had, and I use these just as a little bit of feedback that we've had from the teams. We started and tested the tool out in southern region about 6 or 7 months ago to have a go. And our general rule on things is that we test things in different parts of the network and then expand it out more widely when we get the chance. And the head of maintenance in that area has been our guiding mind here. He's a hugely experienced railway engineer. And as we've worked through, we've tested our thinking and our logic and our findings with him. And it generally accords with what he is observing and what his experience is telling us. So we're reassured on that basis. For the newer managers who are just about seeing this turning up on their doorstep, they really like the idea, but I'll need to prove it to them that it really works and they can see the tangible benefits. They're healthily cynical. But sometimes it brings unexpected benefits, and we've literally pushed it out to the teams in Scotland over the last few weeks. And the local section managers, I guess I had been unsighted, that we had been putting quite a lot of bureaucracy onto the front line, asking them to start to develop their own training plans, which they found quite a lot of hard work. And we can now develop their plans for them, produce a suggestion for them at the press of a button, right? And that alone, just removing all that bureaucracy from their day job, has meant that they are pulling this into them with as much speed as we can handle. So far, the common sense test says it's heading in the right direction. Some final thoughts then. Where to start? Right? In all of this, the whole thing we've aimed to do is not boil the ocean. So we started on small parts of the network. We looked at really narrow examples and built the model up from really points where we could clearly see a link between training and performance and built it out from there. Yes, we have started to employ data scientists, and it must be a good time to be a data scientist, all right? But frankly, this is, to me, is more about upskilling all our people to be comfortable and using data as their friend. It starts with making sure that we've determined the business value that it offers, and sometimes that means that we have to learn to stop doing things. It also means, when I sat down with the managing director of North West and Central actually on Friday, and I was really joyful over the fact that I could point out where training could add the most benefit, as I saw it, to his route. He reminded me not to let go of other areas because they could be tomorrow's problems. And we've got some really high-performing parts of the network. What he doesn't want to do is for us to be focusing on those areas of poor performance so much that those areas of high performance become low performance positions tomorrow. So we keep an eye on everyone's competence, and we're very judicious in what we do. But we tend to probably dip into those areas rather than focus wholesale on, as we do on the areas of low performance. Senior stakeholder buy-in throughout the whole thing is absolutely key, and I'm sure you'll all be aware of that. The most important aspect of that is absolutely making sure that you use examples that are relevant to their piece of infrastructure. The information, you just got to make it personal to their business, right? They're not interested in how much money you've saved in other business or the potential for it. They just want to know what's it mean to them. It's changing very fundamentally the nature of our training. For decades and decades, our approach to training has been produced a standard competence for a standard activity, right? What we're now seeing is actually we need to change the very nature of competence itself. So it's not good enough to have the same approach to maintaining the same type of points. If those set of points is in an area that's sort of rural, we can adopt a sort of local garage type mentality, right? It doesn't have to be high performing. Put it into the throat of London, and we need people to be at a Formula One sort of pit crew type level of responsiveness into the infrastructure, right? One size no longer fits all. And it's bringing us on to a whole new approach of how are we going to fund training, right? And that's the final point that I would leave you with. Actually, if I can directly link training to performance, right? Performance figures and money is a much, much, much bigger prize than anything to do with training costs. And therefore, the discussions I'm having is not whether we're going to charge you for training, but in fact that we give training perhaps for free and take a share of the performance gains that our training gives, putting our money where our mouth is. That's all.
Fabulous. Thank you very much, Guy. We'll be taking questions after the second presentation, so you have them all together. But I'm sure you'll agree with me, a fascinating case study there. And maybe when you're all clicking on that delay repay button, just remember there is somebody at the other end of that trying to fix it for you. And you might just have met him today. Thanks. And now over to Derek.
Dum, dum, dum. Spell in a minute. Awesome, thank you. This is really exciting because you've all come to an analytics track, right? Which means you're totally my sort of people. So this is going to be good. So I'm a data guy who fell into L&D as opposed to an L&D guy who fell into analytics. So I maybe got a slightly different perspective than some of you. My background is in looking at marketing performance, product performance, customer behavior even. This little wink here relates to a piece of work I'd done for a major bank which said, what happens if we're web chatting with customers and we throw in a little wink? Or we throw in a pokey tongue, or we throw in a frown. Does it change the behavior? And we use data to see that it massively does change the behavior. It's really cool. Data is a fantastic thing. Okay, so this may resonate with some of you. Does anyone here identify with this statement? Not too many. Right, so you're probably going to give me a hard time at the end if you're all data experts. Can anyone here run a sentiment analysis just now? Based on feedback? You can. Fantastic. You can hold me to account as well, and you can. Great. By the end of this, everyone will be able to. Right? Bold claim. Will you? Maybe. Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to share some really simple methodologies. Okay, this isn't talking about what I've done necessarily. It's about saying this is how I've done it. Take pictures if there's anything that's going to be useful to you. Right? It's cool. Right. Many people think data is about understanding statistics or programming languages. Clearly, it's not. So, standardization is the key thing when we're collecting data. I was working in banking, and I was invited in to look at L&D. for an organisation. And I thought, this is brilliant. If they've not looked at the data before, they're going to have loads and loads of stuff. I can go in, right? After a couple of weeks, I'll look like a total superhero for finding out all the insight opportunities that they've got. Turns out, all the data they'd gathered over years was absolutely rubbish. They had asked, they had tried to follow Patrick's method of going through these stages of, how was the experience? Was the knowledge transferred? What impact did it have on the business? But they'd done it really badly, okay? The feedback they gathered was they might put learners through an experience and then say, hey, did you enjoy that experience, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, did you enjoy it? And then the next week, they might ask on the same course for different learners, did you love that experience, right? Now, from a data point of view, that's awful, because I can't compare did you like it with did you love it, or did you enjoy it with what have you, right? Different questions have different answers. So I could do no longitudinal study on this stuff. Really, really bad. In terms of how the transfer of knowledge was gathered, that all came down to tests throughout the thing, right? Quizzes, that sort of stuff, which is fantastic from an engagement point of view. Really, really rubbish for predicting performance, it turns out. So I went in, saw how badly they were gathering data, how badly it was organised, and I thought, right, I'm going to read lots of papers on this stuff, and I'm going to see what actually matters. And it turns out 3 things matter, okay? And this stands across sales environments and service environments, okay? So how do we improve the experience, okay? Because actually, if it's a positive experience, people will be more engaged, right? Cognitive load will be reduced, all that good stuff. I don't particularly care if people are happy, frankly, but I do want to know how the experience was and how it works for different populations. Do people know what they need to know? Very different to asking the question, do they know more coming out the course than when they went in? Again, I don't really care, right? I just care about, do they know what they need to know to perform their job? And then fundamentally, what's the impact on KPIs? So I don't come from an L&D background, as I said. I come from marketing and business performance. And ultimately, that's what I want to see. If people are investing money, I want to see that have an impact. Okay, so the very first question, if we think back to standardization, the first question I ask is, describe your experience in 1 word, right? What a lame question. How lazy could we possibly be? Now, the way that this was captured previously was, like I say, we would say, did you enjoy the experience? Tell us about your experience. And we'd invite people to write in, well, you know what, the course was really difficult, the trainer's dress was lovely, and the sandwiches were a little bit iffy, right? We might put 600 people through a learning experience and not actually analyse what they said. Okay, the way we would interpret that data is someone at the end might scan it, pick out 4 positive comments, stick it on a PowerPoint and say, this is what our learners thought, which means we're ignoring 596 people's opinions, right? Really, really rude, if nothing else. So asking people to describe it in 1 word gives us 2 things, right? Qualitative and qualitative data. Does it? Yeah, of course it does. So, if we ask people to describe it in 1 word, it forces them to think what's important, right? So the course was difficult, the trainer had a really nice dress, really nice jeans, whatever. Actually, what I want them to say is difficult, right? Long, boring, slow, engaging, innovative. These are words we can do something about. Words like this. And if we get these words, what we can actually do, because it's data, is we can categorize it, okay? So we can say which of these words are positive things, and which of these words are negative things. Okay, so that's our qualitative data, right? It was slow, it was informative. Our quantitative data is actually 56% of people said it was positive. Now, if we ask the same question for every course, we ask the same question for every learning format, we ask the same question of every age group, every month, your data builds up and you can actually look at it over time. You will start to know that within your organization, a course is typically 84% positive. And then when you do run a course and it comes out at 56% positive, you can say, we've got a problem. Not only do you know you've got a problem, but you know specifically what the problem is because you can just filter on the negative bits. Okay? Does that make sense? How do we do that? This is where it gets really data sciencey, right? It's where we get the big bucks. Well, actually, if we think about this in terms of Excel, and maybe Microsoft Forms or another free tool, and we say describe that experience in 1 word, we've got a column where people put in the word. We've got another spreadsheet, 2 columns, really, really difficult stuff, with a list of words and whether we think it's positive or negative, right? The important thing to do here is if you just go into Google and try and download a dictionary, a sentiment dictionary, or you go to a provider and try and use a dictionary, it won't necessarily be L&D context specific. Okay, so using one word as an n-gram, you can use bigrams, trigrams, lots of word combinations. Context is key here. If I go to a takeaway and they say, can you describe how that food made you feel? And I say, sick, right? It's probably not a good thing. If I'm on a training course and someone says, how was that? And I say sick, I'm assuming that I'm a surfer from 90s California, it's probably quite positive. So context is key. If anyone wants a dictionary and you think, but how do I get a dictionary? I've got one. I've built it up over hundreds of thousands of bits of feedback. You know what? Drop me a mail. I'll give it to you, right? Real easy. You can go in tomorrow to your organisations, ask that one question, run a sentiment analysis, boom, show off to your boss. Easy, easy stuff. Okay, so you can have that up and running tomorrow. That was the first question around experience. The second thing was, do people know what they need to know? Now, the way that we've done it previously, I alluded to earlier, was we ran quizzes, okay? The success criteria for that was 80% of people coming out with a pass mark of 80%. Okay, so let's say we've got a quiz with 10 questions in it, and we're not hitting the 80% pass rate. And we see that loads and loads of people are getting question number 7 wrong. How do we fix that? L&D professionals, you know how to fix this, right? Fix the question, delete the question, right? Get rid of that question, your pass rate goes up, right? If you're measuring pass rate, that's how you solve that problem. Don't focus on making the content better to answer that question, right? You're wasting your time if that's your metric. So I ran an experiment with loads and loads of learners over a long period of time, linking how they answered questions against their actual business movement post doing that, okay? And what I was able to prove was that actually people who scored really highly were no better than people who scored lowly in business performance post-learning, okay? We ran lots and lots of questions with them, and the one question that we found was a really, really good predictor, right? Again, it's really lazy, but it works. There's lots of math behind this, if anyone's interested. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in what you've learned? Now, it doesn't work for anyone. For the vast, vast majority of learners, if they say they understand what they've learned, they will come out understanding what they've learned, and we will see their performance move. This has worked across both service and sales. The vast, vast majority of people, where they say they're not confident, you know what? They're probably not confident. They probably don't know what they need to know. You have outliers within this. You have some people who will rate themselves really highly, people like me with massive egos, who have no idea what they're doing. And they'll come out and they'll just ruin your business. But over large populations, it works, okay? And you can actually build models on this stuff. There's another question I ask, which is, why do you say that? Now, don't limit learners to one word for this thing, for this question. There's 2 reasons for that. One, I'm actually genuinely interested in what they have to say about why they feel as confident as they feel. The other reason for it is you get such a small proportion of people who will come out saying they're not confident or they've got low confidence that it's actually really easy to read the text data anyway, right? It's not an onerous task. You put 1,000 people through, you might have 30 people who aren't confident and will tell you why. Again, what you will see, I don't necessarily care if someone comes out of learning and they say, I'm a 4 confidence, or I'm a 6 confidence, right? If they're within this range, 3 to 7, they're low confidence, right? So actually, that's quite interesting. 8 or 9 confident, 10 very confident, etc. Now, this is held across retail banking, retail, and telecoms industries in terms of the distribution that I've done. It might be different for your own industries, but this is based on looking at these bandings against actual performance in the job after learning. Again, what you will do if you ask these questions over time is you will start to build up a view of what your typical course looks like or what your content looks like. Okay? And you will then know if 5% or 6% of low confidence to no confidence is normal. If you then deploy a new material or a new course where this is higher, You can actually go straight to the text and say, why is that? Of the people who are saying they're not confident, why is that? Right? Are they a particular age? Are they a particular group? Is it a particular problem that they're having? Really simple. So, happy sheets, we love them. I asked 3 questions. Okay? Describe your experience in 1 word. Scale of 1 to 10. How confident? Why do you say that? Right? If I ask people more than that, I'm just taking the piss, right? Because I don't need it. The benefit for this is it's really low effort for the learners, really, really easy to do analysis on, and you will actually get actionable insight from day 1, right? If you turned on your 1 question today, describe this in 1 experience in 1 word, and someone gives you a response today, you take that out tomorrow, you've actually got something you can do stuff with. From those 3 questions, we can build things like this. So we can start to use modern tools to say, okay, what proportion of people were saying positive things? What proportion of people were saying negative things? Of the people with low confidence, specifically, what were they saying? Right? It was poor, it was good, it was too long, it was rushed, whatever. Are we seeing this distribution across all business areas or all populations or what have you, right? Really simple dashboard built on 3 questions. Incredibly, incredibly rich stuff, though. Okay. Anyone seen anything scary so far, or anything you can't manage? No, of course not. It's a piece of cake, this stuff. Okay, so impact on KPIs, right? I'm kind of tempted to stop there because no one's very good at linking, or few people are good at linking KPIs to actual learner feedback or learning activity. Again, taking this from a data point of view, as long as we standardize things, it becomes really, really, really easy. Okay, does everyone know what numerators and denominators are? Yeah, lots of nods. For anyone who doesn't, if I spend 1,000 seconds on a call today, and in fact I take 2 calls today in a telephony center, my average handling time is 500 seconds, okay? I've got 1,002, numerator and denominator. That gives me a metric of average handling time. Or it might be sales per call, or it might be widgets picked off a shelf per hour, or it might be number of errors made in a whatever people do. The key thing is, if you go to your MI function and you say, can I have a report for these 60 people I trained last week, and I'm interested in metric X, Y, and Z, they'll probably say, yes, you can. And 3 months later, you'll get it, right, if they do it at all, because it's not going to be a priority to your MI team. As someone who's actually ran MI teams, comes from an MI background, if you go to them once and ask for the right thing, they can schedule it, and it'll just automatically churn out, and you've got everything you need. So what I do is I understand what's important to the business. Okay, so is it sales? Is it handling time? What is it? I find out what makes up these metrics, numerators, denominators. I need to know a user ID, which I can link to a learner, and I need to know the date of that performance metric. I then go to an MI function. I say, can I have this data in this format, which, again, if you imagine this, an Excel sheet is scalable to any number of metrics. No business has as many metrics as you could fit in. And I want it to run for everybody who's affected by that metric for a rolling 12-month period and spit it out every week. Okay? Two benefits to that. One is I get a repeatable report. I never have to speak to MI again. Thank heavens, right? Really dull people, guys and girls. The other benefit is I have not only the data for my learners, for whom I might be interested in, okay? I've also got all the people who didn't turn up to training. I've also got not only the people who didn't turn up for training, I've got everyone who didn't even get training. Or if I want to deploy multiple formats and take a marketing approach to this and run A/B tests, maybe content with a video, content without a video, I can look at these 2 different populations and actually start to understand, is there a difference in performance between people who got training and people who didn't? Right? It's great going out, launching a course that says we want to drive more sales, and we see that everyone trained, their sales performance went up by 2% after the training, right? And we'll get a high five for that, because what a great job we've done. Actually, if we can see the people we didn't train, their performance went up by 2.5%, we've just cost the business a lot of money, right? Not just taking people out, but actually by damaging the performance. So we need to understand this stuff. So again, if we think about, we've got 3 spreadsheets, right? We can get much more complicated than that. But let's think about 3 spreadsheets. We've got one that's got feedback from learners with 3 questions on it. Right? we've got a spreadsheet with 2 columns of words and whether we think it's a happy word or a sad word. And we've got a spreadsheet for all of our learners in the business, their performance for the metrics we want, with the numerators and denominators. The reason we want numerators and denominators is if we put averages on here, such as average handling time, then we wanted to split that by location, or by age, or by gender, or by race. You would never do that. By anything you want. You can't do it if you've got averages, because then you get averages of averages, and that's horrible. Okay. Then what we can do is actually build a data model, right? This isn't going through steps saying, right, we'll do step 1, we'll get a good feedback, and then we'll do step 2, which is, did people learn stuff, and then we'll do step 3, which is whatever it is. This is about just building the model right up front on 3 Excel spreadsheets, if you want, joining learner feedback to KPI data through user ID, joining learner feedback to sentiment lexicon. I just wanted to put that word in there because I thought it made me sound more intelligent than I am, on the word that people use to describe it. Now, with that really simple model, that very base one, we can start to do things. So this is the same dashboard we saw earlier, but actual metrics in it. So we can see by population, by how people describe things, how did sales move, how did average handling time move. Is a long course, a course that's too long, better than a course that's too short, right? We can go down to the words people use, how they use it, etc. Down at the bottom here is looking at each circle is learning deployment we done by day. So the circle is the day, the color is the format, the size of the circle is how many people were in that population. And we can play out longitudinal studies to say, actually, not only if we look at a macro level, is e-learning better than classroom, or is classroom better than e-learning? Actually, if we look at every learner for every day over every course, the green ones, which is classroom, are better than the red ones, which is e-learning, right, in terms of experience. And that's not to say e-learning's bad for anyone going down that route. It just means we were really, really bad at it, right? It just means our content wasn't very good. Okay, so come back to this. Does this resonate with anyone? Yeah. I would drop the mic, but it's on my lapel, so I won't. Thank you very much.
Fabulous. And I didn't even have to give you a 5-minute warning.
Yeah.
Right, lovely. That's 2 very different presentations. I enjoyed both of those, and there was a very valuable giveaway in that last one. And yes, please, I will have a copy of your lexicon.
Yeah.
Right. I'm sure there must be loads of questions from the floor, as there's so many of you. And we have 2 roving mics, one here and one down the back. So, first question. Fabulous. Furthest away.
It has to be voluntary, otherwise you skew the results. Absolutely right, yeah.
So my question is, do you have any suggestions or tips on how to work with this across multiple languages?
Great question. So it depends on your tech stack. So if you look at Microsoft Azure, it's got translation services within it. So you could actually run it through there, or you could have multilingual dictionaries. There's a number of ways you can do it. So again, if we came back to that list of words and whether they're positive or negative, okay, and we think about that in terms of an Excel spreadsheet, which it is, that's 8,000 rows deep. You could just append anything on there. So the dictionary I've got is based on feedback from tens of thousands of learners giving feedback and all the misspellings that they use, etc. So if you were doing a different language, you might want to build it up again. But you could actually just literally translate what you've got into another language.
You can always take the negative and the positive, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
So for both of you, how do we have these conversations with our stakeholders for the first time and actually read out these results with a straight face when we're not even confident ourselves that we're doing the right thing?
So, from my perspective, I'm absolutely confident that I'm doing the right thing, right? Because it's not my job to make decisions on the data. It's my job to inform the business. And they might go against what I say, and they might go against the evidence, but as long as that's an evidence-informed decision, I don't really care. The organisations I work with care because they can see the results. So one of the things that this piece of work has done was looking at the performance of good sellers pre-learning, good sellers post-learning, okay, and bad sellers good learning, bad sellers post-learning. And what we saw that is actually if you train good sellers in a new product, they will come out with a higher uplift than your poor sellers in that product, okay? Because they're already good at objection handling, they're already driven by extrinsically by their incentive or whatever it is about those people, okay? So actually, if you use the same content for the same group of people on a training program that's run out over the same period of time as you would do if you randomly distributed your good and bad people, or good performers and bad performers, and versus front-loading your good performers, you will get much better results from front-loading your good performers in sales, if that makes sense, because not only do you get that expertise on the floor quicker, but they're also making sales quicker, or incrementally more sales than they would have done. So I actually done that piece of work for an employer. It was worth about £300,000, right? Now, the business listened to that.
I would say from my perspective that the conversations are, as long as they're honest, that's the key thing, that you avoid the bullshit. You explain the fact that at this stage of the game we're in the territory of really good educated guesses. What I find is that they are refreshed by the fact that you're talking about the same things that matter to them. Right, we're not trying to give them some of the previous stuff. They don't really care how good or bad learning is, if you like, in a sense. What they really want is their business performance. And if you're taking what you do and converting it into their language, they find it a refreshing conversation.
So this is a bit of a... so this is a bit of a follow-up question to the previous question. I mean, quality of data, I always find is the most important thing before you start analysing. And I found it makes a difference whether data is requested anonymously or whether it's tracked to the individual learner. I'm just wondering if you have any comments or observations on that.
From my perspective, I always want to know who's giving feedback from an analytics point of view, because I need a user ID, or I need to identify that person to join the dots. And this was touched upon in a couple of talks yesterday. From a stakeholder perspective, when I'm presenting a dashboard or I'm giving results, they never get to see who gave the feedback. So the results are always aggregated and anonymized by populations and cohorts, never by individual. If people could be identified, I wouldn't produce the analysis.
Can I add one thing out there? I'd say that I'm not that worried about data quality. Okay, what I don't want to do is set up a cottage industry in producing data, right? I want to use the same data, good or bad, that the business is using about itself, right? I just want to use enough different reference points that between them, I'm pretty confident that the average between them is giving me the information that we're looking for. But no new data is almost our mantra, because, to be honest, there's a lot of it going around as it is.
Derek, I was looking at your second question around, do they know what they need to know? And you'd written in brackets on the slide, did they, is a whole different question. How do you answer that question with your three questions on your happy sheet?
So one of the organisations I worked with did just ask the quiz at the end of learning, which I didn't find acceptable, because, you know, if you say what colour's an orange and they say it's an orange, well, that's only good if we taught them it was an orange and they thought it was a lemon beforehand, or what have you. So we did run a number of experiments where we tested people's knowledge before they went through learning with a set of questions, and then test it again after learning with a set of questions to see what new acquired knowledge was picked up. Which was a really easy way of doing it, but I found that it wasn't really relevant, frankly, in terms of predicting the future performance. It was great in terms of saying, did we give them more information, but it didn't serve as a predictor in any model to say that it was going to have a business impact, so we just stopped doing it.
But it's costing you money to teach them something they already know?
Potentially, yeah.
As a question for Guy here, just when you were looking at where to start, and you said you're trying to find out the kind of the low-hanging fruit of those. Have you got any tips and hints on how you find out those low-hanging fruits? Obviously, you've got the kind of the stakeholders from the training side and the stakeholders from the delivery side. You just kind of get them together and sort of tell them to work it out, or any tips on trying to work that out?
I would guess that actually. We started by looking at across the range of existing performance data across the business, not at training performance or anything else, just business performance data, looking at areas that were jumping out as big reasons or big causes of delay minutes in this case, or delay costs or fixed times in set areas. And for us, it started in one location, and it was a location just outside Brighton, where we'd seen there had been 6,000 delay minutes as a result of a particular type of fault. We said, that's a bit unusual. We had a look. It taught us that, in fact, nobody had been trained to repair that type of fault, which is why they were getting such a repeat failure in that area. And then that one incident started the conversations around the bazaar to start to understand what that data link was. But it really started with a series of cup of coffee type conversations around to get a feel for where those links established. And once you've got a good look and feel, you can then kind of come back with the science, right? But it has to start with this position of common sense, is my view.
Any more? There's one down here, is there?
Thank you both. Just a question around how when you're trying to demonstrate the impact of training to performance, any tips on how you've gone about isolating the impact of other things other than training to really get into the correlation of training to performance?
From my perspective, it's about using people who weren't trained, so it's about using a control group, right? If you wanted to be really devious, you could also deploy placebo material, right? So you could say, we want to train everyone in sales, right? And give half the people material that's got nothing at all to do with sales. Don't tell them they're on a sales course, and then just see what happens, right? Assuming you're using populations who are in the same environment, the same conditions, with the same management focus, etc. I'm all for running A/B tests, control trials, and deploying placebos, frankly.
And I would say that it comes down to having just multiple data sources. And they then, because they come at it from a slightly different angle, they start to eliminate other factors and point you in the right direction without you having to be too smart about trying to filter things out. But you do obviously sense check it by a sensible conversation.
Thank you.
Any final questions from anybody? Fabulous. Well, I'm conscious that I heard the applause next door and they're all heading to the food stalls quicker than you guys can get there. So once again, a huge round of applause for our two great speakers today. Thank you.